I was standing in my own living room, the same room I paid for, built, and kept over my head for 40 years, when my son looked straight at me and said, "You're not welcome here anymore." And the way he said it, calm, certain, like the decision had already been made, like I was the guest, not the man whose name was still on every document in that house. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him, not because he'd never spoken hard to me before. My boy had learned that talent years ago, but there was something different in his face that evening. No anger, no shame, just a cold kind of patience, like he'd been waiting for me to finally understand where I stood. His wife, Melissa, was by the kitchen island, arms folded tight across her chest, staring down into a mug she wasn't drinking from. She didn't look at me once. Upstairs, I could hear my grandson's video game buzzing through the floorboards like nothing in the world was wrong. That was the part that hit me hardest. A man can survive disrespect. What tears him open is realizing it's happening in his own house while everybody acts like it's normal. I set my keys down on the entry table nice and slow. My hand was shaking, but I didn't let him see it. "I'm not welcome?" I asked. "In Raleigh, North Carolina, in the house I paid off before you were 30? Caleb's jaw tightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make this about the house." I looked at him then, really looked at him. My only son, 42 years old. Good suit, expensive watch, that clipped little tone he used when he wanted to sound like a man in control. I remembered him at 12 with a split lip and tears in his eyes, asking me not to tell his mother he'd gotten into a fight. I remembered carrying him asleep from the truck to his bed. I remembered every fever, every bill, every promise. And there he was, talking to me like I was some old tenant behind on rent. Melissa finally spoke, soft and poisonous. "We've tried to be respectful, Walter." Respectful. That word nearly made me laugh. For 6 months, I'd been sleeping in the downstairs den after my fall, because Caleb said it was safer than me living alone after my surgery. Safer. That was the word he used when he asked me to move back in temporarily. Then my mail started disappearing from the table. Then papers went missing from my desk upstairs. Then Caleb started asking strange questions about the deed, about the taxes, about whether I had a will. I hadn't answered the way he wanted. That was when the air in this house changed. "I want my room back," I said. Caleb took one step toward me. "That's not your room anymore." I felt something old and buried shift inside me. Not fear, not grief, recognition. Because in that moment, I knew this hadn't started tonight. And when I heard the deadbolt click on the front door behind me, even though nobody had touched it, I realized they had already planned what came next. I didn't turn around right away. I stood there, staring at Caleb like I was trying to recognize a stranger wearing my son's face. That quiet click of the lock stayed in my ears, louder than anything he could have said. "You lock the door now?" I asked. "It's for safety," he said, too quick. "Safety from who?" He didn't answer that, just looked past me like I wasn't worth the effort anymore. That's when I turned. The deadbolt was slid tight, chain hanging loose but ready. Same door I'd installed with my own hands back in '98 after a break-in 2 streets over. I remembered measuring it twice, making sure my wife felt secure in her own home. Funny how things circle back on you. I reached for the knob, just to feel it, just to prove to myself I could still walk out if I wanted. "Don't," Caleb said behind me. That stopped me more than the lock did. I turned back slowly. "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." Harder. I let that word sit between us. "You think this is hard?" I said. "You think telling your father he's not welcome in his own home is the hard part of your day?" Melissa set the mug down with a soft click. "Walter, please. We're trying to handle this calmly." "Handle what?" I asked. "What exactly are you handling?" Neither of them answered right away. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. Caleb rubbed his forehead like he was tired of repeating himself. "You can't stay here anymore." "Why?" Another pause. Then he said it. Because it's not working. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Not working how? Melissa finally looked at me then. And there it was. Not guilt, not even discomfort. Annoyance. You forget things, she said. You wander at night. You leave things on. It's not safe for Ethan. Ethan, my grandson. I let out a slow breath. I raised you in this house, I said to Caleb. Kept you alive just fine. That was different, he snapped. You were different. There it was. Not concern, not safety. A judgment already passed. I nodded slowly, like I understood, even though I didn't. All right, I said. Then we'll talk about it. Tomorrow, like adults. Caleb shook his head. No, there's nothing to talk about. And then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded set of papers. When I saw my name printed across the top page, my full legal name, something deep in my gut dropped straight to the floor, because whatever this was, it wasn't a conversation. It was already done. He held those papers out like they were something official, something final. Not shaking, not hesitant. Just steady, like he'd practiced this moment in his head more than once. I didn't take them right away. What is that? I asked. You should read it, he said. That's not what I asked you. His jaw tightened again. That same little flicker of irritation he used to get as a teenager when I pushed him too far. Only now there was no backing down behind it. No second thoughts. Melissa stepped in, her voice smooth, rehearsed. It's just documentation, Walter. We're trying to make this transition easier for everyone. Transition? I finally reached out and took the papers. My fingers felt stiff, like they didn't belong to me. The top page had my name typed clean across it, Walter James Holloway, followed by an address I knew better than my own reflection. My house. I scanned the first few lines. Legal language, cold, precise. Words like occupancy, transfer, authorization. It didn't read like a request. It read like something already decided, already moving forward whether I agreed or not. I looked back up at him. You went to a lawyer, I said. Caleb didn't deny it. We had to. We? I repeated. Melissa didn't flinch. Yes. That word settled in my chest heavier than anything else so far. I turned another page. There were signatures at the bottom. Not mine, never mine. You think this means something? I asked quietly. It does, Caleb said. It means you don't have to go through this the hard way. I let out a slow breath through my nose. The hard way? Neither of them smiled. That's when I noticed something else. A date. Not today, not yesterday. 3 weeks ago. I felt the room shift around me, like the floor had tilted just slightly under my feet. 3 weeks, I said, tapping the paper. You've been planning this for 3 weeks. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't have to. I thought back. The missing mail, the closed doors, the quiet conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the way Melissa started watching me instead of talking to me, the way Caleb kept asking about documents, keys, accounts. This wasn't sudden. This was built, carefully, piece by piece, right under my nose. You already decided I was a problem, I said. No, Caleb replied, but there was no strength behind it. We decided this situation wasn't sustainable. I gave a small nod. Same thing. Silence filled the room again. Heavy. Settled. Then I folded the papers once, neat, careful, and set them back on the table between us. I'm not signing anything, I said. Caleb's expression didn't change. I figured you'd say that. And then he reached past me, opened a drawer in the entry table, and pulled out something I hadn't seen in years. My spare house key. Only it wasn't mine anymore, because when he held it up, I could see it had been freshly cut, and suddenly, I understood. I wasn't the only one who had keys to this house anymore. I stared at that key in his hand longer than I should have. It looked the same. Same cheap brass, same ridges. But it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. Mine had weight to it, years of use. Small scratches from being dropped on concrete, from riding around in my pocket next to loose change. This one was clean, sharp, new. How many? I asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. Enough. That answer settled something deep inside me. This wasn't just about me leaving. This was about control. You changed the locks too, I said. No, he replied. Not yet. Not yet. Melissa shifted beside the counter, her voice quiet but firm. We didn't want it to come to that. I let out a dry breath. But you're ready if it does. Neither of them denied it. I walked past Caleb slowly, my shoulder brushing his just enough to remind him I was still here, still solid, still not something he could move around like furniture. I stepped into the hallway and looked toward the stairs. My room's upstairs, I said. Still has my clothes in it. That's been taken care of, Melissa answered. I turned back. Taken care of how? She hesitated. Just a second too long. Caleb stepped in. Your things are packed. Packed where? In the garage. That hit harder than anything so far. Not the papers, not the lock. That. 40 years of living in that house, reduced to boxes sitting next to lawn tools and paint cans. I nodded slowly, once, twice, like I was making peace with something. All right, I said. Caleb seemed almost relieved to hear that. Good, then you understand. No, I cut in, calm and steady. I understand exactly what you've done. The room went quiet again. I walked to the door this time and placed my hand on the deadbolt. Felt the cold metal under my fingers. Thought about every night I'd locked it to keep my family safe. Then I turned it. The click echoed sharper this time. I opened the door halfway and let the cool evening air drift in. The street outside looked the same as it always had. Quiet, ordinary, like nothing inside this house had just broken. I'm going to the garage, I said. Caleb's voice followed me, tighter now. Why? I paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. Because, I said, I want to see what you decided was worth keeping. No one stopped me. Not Caleb. Not Melissa. And that, more than anything, told me they weren't worried about what I'd find. Which meant one of two things. Either everything was exactly where it should be, or the things that mattered most were already gone. The garage light flickered when I pulled the chain. Same old bulb, same weak hum, but everything under it felt different. My life was stacked in boxes, not carefully, not respectfully, just stacked. Cardboard, plastic bins, a couple of old suitcases I hadn't seen in years. My name wasn't written on anything. No labels, no order, just things pushed aside. I stepped in slowly, the concrete cold even through my shoes. The smell hit me first. Dust, motor oil, something stale. Not the smell of a home, the smell of storage. I crouched down and opened the nearest box. Clothes, folded but rushed. Shirts I'd worn just last week, crammed in next to winter coats and old towels. No care for what mattered. No sense of what belonged together. I closed it and moved to the next. Papers. That made my chest tighten. I pulled a stack out, flipped through it. Bills, old receipts, a few letters, and then I stopped. My hand froze on a folder I hadn't seen in years. Dark blue, worn edges. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of the original house documents, the deed, but not the one I remembered. This one had an additional page attached. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. My name was still there, but it wasn't alone anymore. Caleb James Holloway. Added, not as an heir, not as a note, as a co-owner. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, hollow pull. No, I whispered, more to myself than anything. I flipped through the rest. Signatures, stamps, dates. That same date, 3 weeks ago. My mind started piecing things together, slow at first, then all at once. The questions about paperwork, the missing documents, the way Caleb insisted on helping after my fall, handling things while I was on medication, tired, not fully steady. I remembered sitting at this very kitchen table, him sliding papers toward me, saying it was just insurance stuff, just making things easier. I remembered signing. God help me. I remembered signing. My hand started to shake again, but this time I didn't hide it. This wasn't a plan they made without me. This was something they built, using me. I kept digging through the box, faster now, my breath short, uneven. More papers, bank statements, copies of things I never agreed to share. Then I saw something else. An envelope, thicker than the rest, already opened. I pulled it out and looked inside, and that's when the last piece fell into place. Because what I found in that envelope wasn't about the house at all. It was about me. I stood there in that garage, holding that envelope, and for a long moment I didn't move at all. It felt heavier than paper should feel. I slid the contents out slowly. Medical records. My name across the top again. Walter James Holloway. Only this time it wasn't about property or ownership. It was about evaluations, assessments, words I hadn't agreed to, hadn't even known existed. Cognitive decline. Early stage impairment. Recommendation, assisted supervision. My vision blurred for a second, but I forced myself to keep reading. A doctor's name I didn't recognize. Appointments I never remembered attending, and then signatures, not mine. Caleb's, authorized as guardian. I let out a breath that didn't feel like mine. The world around me went quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on your ears until you can hear your own heartbeat. Slow, heavy, wrong. I looked back toward the door leading into the house. Still open. Light spilling out across the garage floor like nothing had changed. But everything had. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about space. It wasn't even about the house. They weren't trying to make me leave. They were making it official, that I no longer had the right to stay. I stepped back inside slowly, the envelope still in my hand. Caleb was standing exactly where I left him. Same posture, same expression. Waiting. Melissa didn't look at me. I held the papers up just enough for him to see. "You want to explain this?" I asked. No anger in my voice. Just something quieter, something final. Caleb took a breath like he'd been preparing for this part all along. "It's for your own good," he said. I nodded once. Walked past him, straight to the front door. My hand rested on the knob again, same as before, but it felt different now. Not hesitation, not confusion, just clarity. Behind me, Caleb's voice came sharper this time. "Where are you going?" I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, and for the first time that night, I smiled just a little. Then I stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind me.